is dam dead?
We're going to have to start thinking about agentic AI as another user. And we'll have to think about how we create metadata that AI can use as well. We'll just have to start thinking more about non-human users in addition to our human users.
The biggest surprise for me this year was the continued rise of the dam adjacents. Will the dams be the ones to, be more innovative? Will the adjacents get there?
We've just completed a survey, dam trend survey, like at the end of the year, which we got over 100 responses. On the question, looking ahead to 2026, what are the top opportunities or areas of interest you see for your organization when it comes to managing digital assets? The biggest answer is...
Well, we can use AI to add metadata, natural language search capabilities and things like that. But if you don't have your permissions in order, if you don't have your rights management in order, you're essentially creating greater discoverability of assets that could be misused.
I think there's a lot of set it and forget it kind of thinking, and it's the very opposite of that.
Welcome back to Damn Right. I'm Chris Lasinick, your host and CEO of the best damn consulting company in the business, AVP. This episode is not a traditional year-end recap. We are not here to run through product announcements or headlines from 2025. Instead, we want to focus on what the past year actually taught us and what those lessons mean for how organizations should approach DAM in 2026. Over the last year, we have worked with organizations across industries, sizes, and DAM maturity levels. New buyers, teams migrating platforms, organizations trying to scale AI, and others simply trying to get the fundamentals right. Across all of that work, a few patterns became impossible to ignore. The technology is moving fast. AI capabilities are accelerating. DAM tools are becoming more powerful and more accessible. But at the same time, many organizations are still struggling with foundations like metadata, governance, integrations, and change management. That gap between what platforms can do and what organizations are ready to support showed up again and again in 2025. So in this conversation, we're talking about what actually mattered, what turned out to be distraction or hype, and where DAM teams need to focus next. This is about practical insight, not hindsight. If you're responsible for a DAM platform, evaluating one, or trying to make your DAM program deliver real value, this episode is designed to help you move into 2026 with clearer priorities and better questions. Let's get into it.
Welcome, everyone, to the last Damn Right podcast of 2025. It's great to have you here. And since we have some new faces and a number of folks with us today, we're going to start this off with a round robin intro. What I'd like each person to do is to tell us your name, tell us your title, and give us one word or phrase that sums up DAM in 2025 for you. And Kara, we're going to throw it to you first.
All right. Kara Van Malsen, Managing Director, and I lead our services team. My one word is essential.
John, let's go to you next.
All right. John Horodisky, Managing Director, Strategic Client Growth. And my word or phrase is DAM is a human endeavor.
Amy, coming to you.
I'm Amy Rudersdorf. I'm the Director for Consulting Operations. And my word is foundational.
All right. So Sean, coming to you.
I'm Sean Abercam, Director of R&D Services. And I was interpreting this more personally. And for me, DAM in 2025 has been migration. Lots of migration.
All right. Wonderful. Well, the questions I'll ask will dig a little bit deeper, and I think we'll hear about more of what you mean with these one words or phrases. But thanks for kicking us off there. So, Amy, I want to start off with you with sort of a big picture question. I'm thinking, looking back on 2025 here, I'm going to ask everyone to chip in if you have something to say, but Amy, you're going to kick us off. And the question is, how would you characterize the DAM landscape in 2025? What were some of the biggest surprises? What were some of the things that just stayed the same that were evergreen? What does the story of 2025 tell us about DAM's evolution? Anything in there?
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that. So looking back, I feel like it was a year of both disruption, but then sort of wrapped in familiar patterns. So for me, the biggest surprise, and I do a lot of selection work at AVP, so I see a lot of DAM demos. And what I'm seeing is that low-cost DAM solutions are proving that they're no longer lightweight, The cost might be, but the systems are not. Some of them are genuinely powerful and innovating faster, I think, than many enterprise tools. They're closing the feature gap in real time. And I think it raises a real question, and that is, how will high-cost vendors justify the premium if this trend continues? So to me, that's a big surprise. I was not fully aware of that this year. As far as constraints go, I think it's the belief that AI can fix anything. It's still alive and well. I think some organizations dove in head first, some stayed cautious. But what I think is encouraging is that more DAM admins are realizing that their structured data is the real engine behind responsible and effective AI. So once they understand that, the tech becomes less mysterious and I think more manageable. Hype is eternal. AI is today's hype. I think that's going to be replaced soon. The cycle resets. So we'll see what 2026 looks like. But ultimately, to me, the story of 2025 is that DAM continues to democratize. This kind of goes back to the foundational and familiar points that I've made. Tools are getting more accessible. Admins are getting more strategic. And I think the field took a noticeable step toward smarter automation this year. And that's grounded again in foundational data, strong metadata, not just hype.
Love that. Yeah, I think the opening sentiment there around the gap lessening, I think in some ways is true, and in some ways, I would say that it's sort of perception that unusable assets or less usable assets in a low-cost, less sophisticated DAM look exactly like the same assets in a really sophisticated DAM. So I think if you put those things together, what you just said, it's like when the fundamentals are in place, when the foundation is in place, then the differentiation becomes greater. But there's work to do. It's harder to make the differentiation between these lower cost, pretty sophisticated dams, for sure. Thanks for those insights. Anyone else want to jump in?
I can jump. Doubling down on something that Amy said that I certainly noticed. Very much a shift from the beginning of this year to the latter part of the year, that recognition that effective use of AI requires the foundational data and structure and governance and all that. I think earlier in the year, it was still in very much like mystery mode, where AI was like this thing that could solve all our problems according to, the market and leadership's buying that and saying like, implement it, do all the things AI, it'll solve all the problems that we have with our unstructured data and our challenge, the assets that no one can find, and et cetera. And now we know that's not true at all. I think the industry has really realized that through some painful experimentation and testing. And I think we all understand the technology better and what it requires to be effective. So I noticed that shift throughout the year, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that felt present at Henry Stewart Dam, New York. I think a lot of more pragmatic discussions. John.
I can chime in. Yeah, I mean, I love the word that you used, Amy. The it's foundational, and I think that's probably a theme that we all sort of cling to as this industry is changing. I do think 25 was very much a year of fluctuation. I love that word. We saw at the beginning, still do see this whole interest in AI agents. I think that's fascinating. I did poll 12 dam systems. Only 2 appear to be doing it. Is it actually working? I kind of want to know. Looking at you, 2026, give me a little bit more information. The biggest surprise for me this year was the continued rise of the dam adjacents. I love like the Stag AIs, Storytech, Cement.io, Inevitable, Sesame. I want to see more of that. I think that's quite exciting. And as dam evolves in this fluctuation mode, like see who's going to outpace each other. Will the dams be the ones to, be more innovative? Or will the adjacents get there? I don't know. It's kind of interesting to see, looking forward to 26. And my constant for the year is, I've been doing this for 20 years, and it still is a lovely surprise to meet new folk who are getting into DAM for the first time. Amy, a lot of your work is in that space of that selection process, and it's amazing, here we are, 2025, people are still going into DAM. And even those who are maybe reselecting and getting a new system, it goes right back to those foundational moments and steps. And I like that. That's a good thing. Yeah.
All right, quick break. Okay, listen, I've got a hot stock tip for you. Wait, what? Why in the world would I have a hot stock tip for you? That's a different podcast. But now that I have your attention, I want to tell you about the only other place other than the Damn Right podcast where you can get real deal, ear to the street, news you can use sort of information. It's AVP's banger of a newsletter called Damn Good Advice. And it's packed with practical stuff about digital asset management. Things like what to fix first, what not to overthink, and which problems are maybe more of a lifestyle choice at this point. It's written by the AVP team who spend a lot of time inside real DAM programs across every vertical, so we're heavy on DAM street cred and light on hype. If you work with DAM and enjoy being quietly validated or warned just in time, you can sign up at weareavp.com/damngoodadvice. That's weareavp.com/damngoodadvice. DAM, of course. It's one email, it's free, and if you hate it, you can unsubscribe dramatically and tell no one. All right, back to the show.
So let's move on to the something that I think we can bring a unique lens to here. One of the advantages we have as being a services firm is that we get to work across all sorts of industries, all types of organizations, and I think that's pretty unique. So this next few minutes I want to spend just kind of letting folks get the benefit of that perspective and expertise and experience we bring to the table there. And I'd like to ask the question, when you look across industries, what are some insights that are industry-specific DAM trends that you've seen? And what are some overarching trends that you see in DAM across all industries? Maybe we've already touched on that. If so, that's okay. But love to just get some of this cross-industry perspective. Kara, I'm going to throw it to you to kick us off there.
Okay, I'm just going to represent one industry that I have been able to do some work in this year, which has been really fascinating, but I will tie it to a broader trend as well. So that industry is in footwear and apparel. And I think we could extend this to other manufacturing space where we've started seeing in some cases, in some companies, that they're starting to think about DAM beyond the marketing DAM. So that's historically and traditionally where DAM has lived in these companies. But to see DAM as a key tool in the product creation process. So in the process of making a shoe or a jacket or whatever, there's a ton of visual assets that are created, media files. And some of these are like Adobe Illustrator files. Some of them are 3D files. Some of them are, renders from these tools. There's just a ton of them out there. And the default way of dealing with them has historically been things like SharePoint and Dropbox, et cetera. And there's a lot of sharing across global supply chains. There's a lot of security concerns, IP concerns, version concerns, because you have to deal with a lot of different stages of the product development process, different milestones and phases of that work. And so DAM solves so many of those problems. It just wasn't a part of the tool set until recently. It's starting to become that. So I think this is very cutting edge. There are just a few companies who are starting to really seriously implement DAM upstream into the product creation lifecycle, and then connect that downstream to marketing, because ultimately those visual assets flow into what gets put onto the website, the e-com platform, goes out to partners, distributors, retailers, et cetera. So I think we're still a little ways off from that end to end, but it's really interesting to see where DAM is popping up, not in its kind of in the historical place that it's always lived. And I think that is the broader trend that I'll point to, which is that centralizing and kind of coming up with a truly enterprise solution to digital assets that is not just marketing centric is a thing we're seeing in other industries as well. So I'll start with that.
That's great. And in fact, it's probably a good point to call out that today, with a publication came out, the Interline DPC report, 2026 DPC report, in which, Kara, you've got a piece in there about this very issue. So we'll put that in the show notes if people want to dive deeper into that topic, they can. Any other perspectives folks want to bring to the table?
I have something, but I want to wait and see if anyone else does, because mine is sort of off in its own little world.
Jump in, bring it. Let's do it now.
All right. So this is something that I've had to think about for the last couple of years, and that is, we're going to talk about metadata again. So when you're in some of these industries like what Kara talked about, or finance, or whatever it might be, metadata is pretty straightforward, right? It's kind of flat. It can be complex, but not as complex as what I'm about to talk about. So I put it in quotes because it's not always the case, but it's often the case. So we are starting to see dams being used across the organization. So we're starting to see this group of people that have not used these types of dams before, and I'm talking about librarians and archivists. And so suddenly they're brought into these machines that are not library and archive specific machines. And they're really used to bespoke systems that address their specific metadata needs. As we start bringing these populations into what I'm going to call a corporate dam, or a marketing dam, or a brand dam, there's a real tension there, because libraries want these systems to handle their complex metadata structures. They want to stick with standards, and the dams don't know what to do with this. They're befuddled by this population. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that it's not necessarily the metadata that's inherently complicated, but it's operating in a context that the systems weren't built to handle. But it's a trend that I'm seeing. We've seen several libraries and archives across the U.S. Adopt certain systems that are under-prepared for the complexity that they're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm seeing.
I think to add to that too, Amy, I like seeing vendors that are starting to rise to meet these new needs, because I think some of these more specialized needs that we're seeing both in, libraries, archives, and museums, especially higher education, where they're being met with new requirements for access. So more metadata, more captioning. There's going to be more need for AI to help assist generate more metadata. But even in industry with very fine-grained access controls, maybe even at the metadata level, I think that these more specialized needs that we're seeing really are going to represent broader needs across industries. And it's good to see the vendors that are really to meet those needs.
I mean, cross-industry, all these comments make me think about something we were talking about last year around this time, which is adaptable dam, which is something I've heard less about this year, and not everybody uses that term, but it's what I think of as the real key characteristic of a true enterprise dam when I talk about enterprise dams anyway, which is the ability to adapt to all sorts of different scenarios, use cases, requirements for given departments, business units across an enterprise. In ways that make it really flexible. So a single dam can operate under lots of different business units and maybe look even like totally different dams, but in truth, they're really one. And that's just an interesting, that's where I see, Amy, you started early on in the conversation talking about, this pressure coming from the lower cost dams. That's where I see the biggest differentiation still there, is that they're not quite to that adaptable. They have a lot of really slick features and they're doing really cool stuff, but we don't see them as adaptable. And that's not really to make a judgment call to say adaptable is good or bad, because every organization is going to have unique needs, and maybe that's perfect for them and maybe it's not. But it's a distinction that I think is worth noting. And we do see across all industries adaptable dam being something that's being implemented to all sorts of different use cases.
Please support Damn Right by going ahead and hitting that follow, subscribe, like button. Thanks.
For trends of the year, it's without doubt that AI is still there, but I do think it's changing. The number one search term this year on Google was, awkwardly, Gemini. a little bit eating your own type of thing, but it's an interesting first search result for Google. But I think we are seeing a little shift to the, going back to my earlier point of the human side of AI. And it was a pleasure this year to hear more words like trust and authenticity, provenance, and even C2PA. And I think as we become more humanized, I think we're going to see in 26 a little bit more discussion of those things. There are 2 pieces of legislation coming into the United States as well as Europe on artificial intelligence acts. And just like we were in 2017, as GDPR was coming in 2018, a lot of people are now beginning to go, oh, is my metadata culpable? Oh, wait a minute. I'm not prepared. Good. This is a time of change and fluctuation. So I think we're going to have a lot more questions coming towards us, as we should, because there are some big changes coming.
You see all the archivists and the museum's professionals standing a little taller in the Damosphere conversations when trust and authenticity come up. This is, of course,
absolutely
something they've been talking about for decades. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Let's move on. I want to talk about something, and actually, if I would have contributed to what's the word or phrase for 2025, the focus of this question would have been that, and that's what I'm calling the damn AI gap. And that essentially is the disconnect between what we see platforms and technologies just moving at hyperspeed. And you talked about that, Amy, like we're just seeing innovation at a rate we haven't seen it maybe ever. And lots of promises, lots of possibilities there. But there's this other picture that we see, and that's that organizations that are using DAMs, which are prospective customers of all these great AI features, are struggling still with the fundamentals. That's the word foundation, as you said, Amy. And they're, until the house is in order on the foundation side, they're unable to really leverage the possibilities and fulfill kind of that vision that's there. And Sean, I'll point this question in your direction. And it really is, one, tell me if you think that sounds right to you or if you're seeing something different. But if that's true, are we at risk of overselling AI and DAM before most organizations really even have the foundation to support it? Or what do you think the implications of that are, and how does that play out?
I think it's still really early and exciting days in AI DAM. I think one of the benefits of commercial or consumer AI that we're seeing, like ChatGPT and Gemini, is that like we're all just getting firsthand experience learning using AI. We're all really learning about the risk involved. We're seeing it wrong. We're seeing all this AI slop. And so we're all getting really steeped in that. We're getting a lot of experience in our own personal lives. So when we come to DAM, I think most DAM users are coming to it with healthy skepticism. I don't think people are going to just be trusting AI features in DAM blindly. Starting to see the possibilities and are starting to have like their own, creative ideas about what they can do. So I think it's really exciting that we're starting to see these AI features in DAM, but I think it's really going to take some of that experimentation and, helping give DAM users the tools that they need to better evaluate some of these tools, to be able to do their own benchmarking, to test on their own collections, as well as having some two-way relationships, two-way conversations with DAM vendors about like what they want to see there. So I hope that DAM vendors are engaging users in developing out the features that they want to see. And I hope that users are going to feel empowered to be able to ask for what they want to see and be able to lead some of that creative development in DAM.
Yeah, and I think we saw some of that early experimentation and kind of proofs of concept and think of the AI tech playoff, I think it was called, that Christina Huddart did at DAM New York. It was some of the more realistic, and that your comments make me think of that, Sean. Like we need to see some of these early proofs of concept. People have to inspire each other. We got to move. There's a pace of evolution there that's just natural.
I have a thought briefly. I agree with what's already been said. I think this idea of agentic AI is way ahead of its time. I mean, just with that in mind, like we are cautiously experimenting, testing, and finding opportunities. But anytime you need accurate, precise, trustworthy results from an AI, you do not want to let that sucker run, automatically. And that's the premise of agentic, is like, it's just going to do, it's a little agent and it does things for you. It'll take time to get there. And maybe in a small scale, there's a few ways we can use agents sooner than later. But at a large scale, that is going to take time. And I don't see that adoption happening immediately. So I think there is definitely a gap on the agentic side of things for sure.
Mm-hmm. I love the word you use, Sean, of skepticism. I do think there is a healthy dose of that happening right now. And it's good to slow down. Sometimes we feel like we have to go faster. This is a great time to slow down. One of our clients this year took 6 months to evaluate the AI component of their DAM to figure it out. So as a calling card for everyone in 26, it's okay. Slow down. Think about these things. And, a word that you love, Kara, governance. It's good. This can help, for overuse, misuse, compliance, ethics, all those things. If you're not doing governance in 26, as a gift to you, governance. It's lovely. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I think about all these comments make me think that one of the things that can be risky or a good reason to slow down, or when you don't have the fundamentals in place, you think here about, well, we can use AI to add metadata, natural language search capabilities, and things like that. But if you don't have your permissions in order, if you don't have your rights management in order, you're essentially creating greater discoverability of assets that could be misused, right? That's so you got the rights management, the permissions have to be in place in order for that to be a positive thing. Otherwise, it could be a big liability. Amy, I want to chat with you as someone who I think this question will leverage your expertise in doing a lot of DAM selection projects with customers, and that I'm wondering, from our perspective, where do you see biggest disconnects and divergence between what platforms offer and what the customer realities are? And what do you think we can do about that to improve on it?
Yeah. Okay. So the biggest, I have three. So I would say that what we hear from vendors and what customers really get is very different when it comes to AI, which we've talked about, when it comes to search, and when it comes to integration. So I'll start with AI since that's where we all have been. But I think vendors make it sound, and I want to back up again and say that I have sat through 30 demos this year. So I've heard directly from the sales folks, and vendors make it sound like AI can just be flipped on tomorrow. Like, you buy this system, we flip it on, you're good to go. But I think, as we've already said, most clients aren't ready, not because they're not interested, but because the foundations aren't in place. So the reality is that AI is only going to work when scaffolding is solid. And so that narrative coming from the vendor to the client just doesn't feel right? The other one in the same vein is search. And this one to me is just relentless. Like, every vendor claims their search is unmatched. And then we see the search, and in reality, most of them are doing basic phrase searching. Very few offer true natural language search. But again, that depends on good metadata. And the vendors don't always talk about that, right? They talk about the functionality, but they don't talk about what needs to happen to make this work. So the clients expect transformative findability, and end up right back where they started because they don't know how to make search and AI work. They've just been told it's easy, just buy the system. And then I think the third one is integration. Again, we talk about integration like it's flipping on a switch. And it's really important that we're educating the clients that integration is complicated. If they already have an integration set up with Canva or something like that, great. But if you really need to build something with your CSM or something, that takes time, that takes ongoing money. And those are not conversations that are necessarily being had from the vendor perspective. So to me, we have to shift the conversation from features and functionality to the conditions for success. So here's the functionality, but here's how you make it successful. And I think the vendors need to be clear about what their tools require in order to perform well. I don't think that's necessarily happening in all cases, but I also think that we as consultants need to help clients understand that great AI and powerful search isn't magic, and that they're again the outcome of good governance, structured data, and consistent stewardship.
So some education and awareness sounds like how we do better on that front. Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, I'm not saying you're being unfair to what we're calling vendors, we'll call platforms or whatever. I think a lot of the things they say are true, but it's under those conditions of success in which they're true. And the missing piece of information there, what are the conditions for success, right? So there's nothing sinister about
lying.
it or something, but it is a disconnect, and it's something that does cause frustration in some, in worst case scenarios, failed implementations, right? But there's a big spread there where things can play. Yeah. So love that insight. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that?
I'll pick up on the one word that you chose, Amy, because that I saw a lot this year, and that's integrations. And, pardon the pun of the question from you, Chris, of like the disconnect, but it's the disconnection. I love Scott Brinker, and I love his MarTech map. But if there is a more stress-inducing picture you could ever see, you look at that and you're like, so look at the point of view from a client going, oh my golly, what could I do? Are they all talking to each other? I don't think they are, but that work to get there, to your point, Sammy, about foundational materials, that's a disconnect. Are the tools talking to each other? So again, as a nod to 26, y'all, let's get connected, because there's a lot of work to do to get to those good connections. Integrations are one of them, but there's foundational steps to get there. So
the metadata has to be good to connect it from one system to another. Right? Foundational.
Yeah, integrations is one of those scary conversations that it's like if people knew what they were getting into beforehand, they might be hesitant. However, in the end, it's often the ROI is there, but boy, they're just a lot more complex than people realize. And I think platforms, their position, they're trying to sell their dam, probably doesn't do them a service to talk about really over stress, how complex integrations are. But yeah, that's a point of tension frequently. I mean, I'm curious what you all think. Like, we've saw the emergence over the past several years of like iPaaS systems, integration as a service. We still see a lot of custom integrations. I wonder, and I think there's pros and cons to integration as a service. I don't think it's a no-brainer, but any insights as to what you're seeing there on the customer front, like why that may or may not be taken up? Because there's a lot of reasons it seems attractive, but we see a lot of people still doing custom integrations. Tara, I see you smiling.
I have a thought. I've talked to people about this. Also, I was going to save this one, but we've just completed a survey, DAM trend survey, like at the end of the year, which we got over 100 responses. So thank you so much to everyone who responded. And I've had the privilege of starting to do some initial analysis of our results. And on the question, let me just read you the question. Looking ahead to 2026, what are the top opportunities or areas of interest you see for your organization when it comes to managing digital assets? So no surprise, the biggest answer is AI. It relates to AI. It's like in the category of AI. But slightly surprising to me is the second most common answer was about integrations, followed closely by automation. And some people are very clear to say, I don't mean AI automation. I mean like any kind of automation and workflow. So I see that integration and workflow automation thing kind of under one thing. Taken together, that answer comes up more than AI comes up. So this is very much on people's minds. And I think part of the reason is because, one, they recognize the need, like the value is going to come when we can connect these tools and create these end-to-end workflows. And won't that be great? But it's hard to do. And our tools are not necessarily providing us with our platforms, and that's not just the DAM, but it's the DAM and the PIM and the CRM and the CMS, and all of them are not necessarily providing us with what we need to make these connections. So I think the iPaaS pathway is very interesting because it's sort of a middleware that, some of these tools are kind of more, user, like they're more GUI based where it's drag and drop. Some are a little bit more, you have to write some code. Some things are fall in between. But when I've seen them demoed to, the dev teams within the companies, they're all like, we'll do it ourselves. And so sometimes I feel like there's a need for control and ownership, because at the end of the day, the integration sort of lives in a gap between the tools, and the customer has to own that gap. They are responsible for maintaining those connections because they are unique to their organization. So I think there's a hesitancy to go all in on a third-party tool. Then we just have another tool in the mix. We don't kind of have as much ownership. It's harder to maybe troubleshoot when things break. But gosh, these things are so fragile. These custom, complex integrations. One update of one system and the whole thing goes down, at a critical moment. And it's just so frustrating. So, I think that it's a thing.
I think a lot of time clients don't really, they really don't understand how complex it is. I think there's a lot of like set it and forget it kind of thinking, and it's the very opposite of that, as Kara said, and that's tricky. Trying to make that point to folks who maybe don't want to hear it.
Yeah. It is a thing, as Kara said. It's a thing. All right. So let's jump to our next question. I'm curious, what do you think was missing in 2025 from the Damosphere, the marketplace, conversations happening? And here we might think of features, but I'm thinking here more like maybe thought leadership, capabilities, vision, what that you hope to see in 2026 that you think was missing from the conversation in 2025. Carol, I'll throw it to you, although I suspect that maybe we just drew that answer out of you in the last conversation.
You kind of did. I was like saving my integration comment for this question. So yes, we already talked about that. But I had been thinking about it. So I did this analysis this morning, and I saw that integration was this top concern from our survey respondents. So that was a surprise, but I had been thinking about this for quite some time. So for me, what I had seen in the marketplace as far as missing was better solutions for custom integration. I think there are a few DAM platforms out there doing some great stuff in this area, and I'm very excited about those. I'd like to see more from more of the vendors, because I think this is where there's some real investment needs to happen. We need solutions to come from them. So that's one. The other missing thing I felt in 2025, just to go back to our AI discussion for a minute, is more real world results and experiments and findings and solutions. Like, I still feel like we're in the hype stage. We're getting a lot of feature capability, things kind of pushed at us. I'd like to see an equal pushback on the reality side of things, like what's working, what's not working. I want to hear real stories from real people. Heard some of them. I think we get to hear some every once in a while, but that isn't taking up as much of the bandwidth as the other side of that story. So that's part of what I thought was missing this year.
That was mine for the year, Kara, was we talk about the AI, but where are those case studies? And I'm looking at all of us, and that's the community, that's all of us. I'm looking at the vendors. If you say people are using it, like, you get them to talk about it, please, because if you're trying to get more people on it, we need to hear those stories. So I need more of that. Where were they? So 2026, I'm looking at the vendors and looking at all of us who are in that space. If you're doing it, talk about it. A few slides, something. Let's share these case studies with each other, because we're learning together in this community. So I need more case studies. And number two was change management. why aren't we talking more about that? We see so many clients, and when we go to conferences, we hear these things, and they're all in these disconnected timelines. Where's the change management discussion? My goodness, it's hard. It's difficult to put some of these things together. So I was missing some change management talk.
Yeah, I was thinking along those same lines. I feel like in the same way we're adopting these really complex technologies, but we haven't really absorbed the change required to do them. And it feels like that's the missing conversation. It's around building capability, like developing digital fluency, strengthening cross-functional collaboration, and like creating a culture where people are equipped to do this and not intimidated by change. So I'd have to agree that change management is a huge piece of this.
Just proves the point. DAM is a program or an operation. It's not a technology alone, right? There's lots of stuff that revolves around it.
Please support Damn Right by going ahead and hitting that follow, subscribe, like button. Thanks.
I'm going to throw one of our second to last question to you, John, and it's a controversial one. There's always been a trickle of this thing, but I feel like I've seen a little bit of a flow in the ebb and flow of things as of late, and that's this bold statement that DAM is dead. So my question to you, is DAM dead? Tell us what you think.
We don't need any more provocation in this very provoking year that we've already been living through. So I will just flat out say, no, it is not dead. Changing, yes, but not dead. DAM is still at the core. We see it in our clients. We see what they're trying to do, the different ways of using DAM. Kara, your comments about DPC and how they're using those different ways outside of the marketing sphere. It's not dead. It's changing, yes, but it's not dead. Final statement. Anyone else?
I'll add. So way back in library school, a long time ago, I had a classmate who was very anti-metadata. And he was just like, someday, we had a very sci-fi attitude about how someday we're not going to need metadata. You're just going to be able to put it into a computer and it'll pull all the information out that you need, and we won't need to create metadata. And we just really butted heads in library school. But I think about it, and every once in a while, are we there yet? Do we need metadata? And I think the answer is still yes, because as long as we have humans that need to access assets, we will need metadata. But also I think we're going to have to start thinking about agentic AI as another user. And we'll have to think about how we create metadata that AI can use as well. So no, I don't think DAM is dead or will be dead. I think we'll still have a need for metadata and a place to keep that metadata. And we'll just have to start thinking more about non-human users in addition to our human users.
A lot of people are, when they say it, are kind of thinking about how much the technologies are changing, but we think about DAM as a practice. It's obviously necessary and still thriving.
I had a different kind of take on this question, but just going back to the DAM adjacent tools that we've seen in platforms, more of these I feel like have been coming up, as well as newcomers, startups in this space that they don't necessarily call themselves DAM. They say they have DAM capabilities, and they say, DAM capabilities, that's not what they're selling. They're selling something else that, some other, it's just a function or feature of what their product has. So I feel like I've asked some of those folks, what category do you put your product in? What do you call this, so that buyers understand what you're selling? And I got some really interesting mixed answers. So this category shift maybe a thing, and this idea of the DAM adjacent, where DAM as a feature, not as the full solution, is coming up. So we'll see where that goes, but it's just a thing that I've had some interesting conversations about.
I have some thoughts on this too. My perspective, I think, is slightly different, again, because I'm coming from this selection perspective. I also don't think DAM is dead. And to me, again, I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the conversation is often skewed towards organizations with deep pockets, fully integrated tech ecosystems. These are the people who can have this conversation. when people claim it's obsolete, I think they're usually imagining these environments where systems talk to all these other systems seamlessly and where content flows effortlessly. And, they have the infrastructure and the ability to build this world. But to me, that's a luxury problem. So for small and mid-sized organizations, I even think for some large organizations that maybe don't have those deep pockets or without that level of support for integration, DAM is nowhere dead. It's the most reliable way to centralize assets, and enforce the standards and the metadata and the rights and all of those things in a way that SharePoint or Dropbox can't do. And a lot of these organizations are moving from those kinds of platforms into DAM. And for them, DAM is this thing that we think of it traditionally, and it's working for them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll breathe a sigh of relief here that I don't have to change the name of the podcast. DAM is not dead. So let's wrap up here and with the question that we ask everybody every time on the Damn Right podcast, which is, what's the last song you added to your favorites playlist? And Sean, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I think I'm a little late to the Geese party, but "Oh Pay Do Cocaine" by Geese has been my latest earworm.
All right, I've not heard it. Gotta listen. Amy.
Mm-hmm. Cameron Winter. Mine is Natalia Lafourcade, and she has a song called Hasta la Raíz. It came out in 2015, but I just found out about her. She's like a Grammy award-winning or nominated singer, and she's amazing. So check her out.
Great. John.
Crying, Laughing, Loving Line by Labi Siffre, a folk song from the 1970s. If you don't know the song, it's the last song in the movie The Holdovers. And it is beautiful and it makes you cry. And it's one of my favorite holiday movies. So Labi Siffre, look him up.
I'm 0 for 3 on these. I don't know any of these. I look forward to listening to them. Kara.
So I was on podcast, not that long ago, and I realized I haven't added a song to my favorites playlist since then because I don't really use it that much because my son destroyed my Spotify account when he took it over, and I got him a new account, but I haven't cleaned mine up. So I'll give you a different answer. I do a lot of listening to NTS Radio. NTS is an online radio streaming platform out of the UK. At all times, they have 2 live channels going, but you can also go back and listen to everything that they've aired. And I have listened to 3 times to this one show, which is they have different DJs and celebrities, even musicians come on and DJ. So the actor Ayo Edebiri, she plays Sydney in The Bear. She did this episode a few months back, and I just keep listening to it over and over. I just love her playlist there. It's great. So, sorry, it's not the right answer, but I didn't have a new song.
Well, that's totally acceptable. All right, and mine is a song for you by Donny Hathaway, which is a very popular song. But if I heard it, I didn't remember, and I heard it recently. I was like, it's so good. His voice is just like a warm blanket on a cold winter day. It's beautiful. All right. Well, thank you all so much for helping us close out 2025. Lots of exciting things in 2026. As Kara referenced, we got this 2026 Damn Trends report that we'll be sharing more about in January. Looking forward to that. But meanwhile, we wish everybody a wonderful new year, happy holidays, and thanks to you all.
Okay, listen, I've got a hot stock tip for you. Wait, what? Why in the world would I have a hot stock tip for you? That's a different podcast. But now that I have your attention, I want to tell you about the only other place other than the Damn Right podcast where you can get real deal, ear to the street, news you can use sort of information. It's AVP's banger of a newsletter called Damn Good Advice. And it's packed with practical stuff about digital asset management. Things like what to fix first, what not to overthink, and which problems are maybe more of a lifestyle choice at this point. It's written by the AVP team who spend a lot of time inside real DAM programs across every vertical, so we're heavy on DAM street cred and light on hype. If you work with DAM and enjoy being quietly validated or warm just in time, you can sign up at weareavp.com/damngoodadvice. That's weareavp.com/damngoodadvice. DAM, of course. It's one email, it's free, and if you hate it, you can unsubscribe dramatically and tell no one.